Picture this. A black ship slides out of the morning fog, sails torn, flag with a skull snapping in the wind, and a captain in a long coat leaning on the rail with a grin that says he hasn't had a plan since Tuesday and it hasn't stopped him yet. To every kid who ever watched that scene, piracy looks like the last truly free life. No boss, no rules, no taxes, just the open sea, a loyal crew, and a treasure chest full of gold waiting at the end of a map. And almost everything in that picture is wrong. Not the fun parts, the money parts. Because underneath the rum and the sword fights, a pirate ship was a business, a strange, violent, astonishingly well-organized business, with a startup cost, a payroll, an operating budget, a compensation plan, and a business model so cleverly designed that it outcompeted the most powerful navies on Earth for the better part of a generation. And the most shocking thing about pirate economics isn't how brutal it was. It's how modern it was. These men, most of them illiterate, most of them dead by 30, accidentally invented ideas about pay, ownership, and workplace democracy that the legitimate world wouldn't catch up to for 200 years. So today, we're going to do what no pirate movie ever does. We're going to run the numbers. We're going to price out an entire pirate operation, from the ship to the plunder to the noose at the end. And by the time we're done, you're going to understand the real reason thousands of men chose a short, doomed life under a black flag. It wasn't the gold. It was never really the gold. It was the deal. Pirates offered the best deal on the ocean, and today you'll see exactly why the math was worth dying for. So let's do what we always do. Let's start at zero, and let's build a pirate crew from nothing, one plundered line item at a time. First, the ship. And here we hit the first difference between the movies and the money, because a pirate does not buy a ship. Buying a ship would require capital, a shipyard, and a very understanding banker, and no bank on Earth is writing a loan for aggressive maritime redistribution. So the pirate's startup capital is not money, it's violence. The seed round is a boarding action. You take a smaller, faster vessel, you use it to capture a bigger, better one, and you trade up again and again, until you're commanding something that can fight. But let's price what that ship is actually worth, because it tells you the scale of what these men were stealing. A proper armed sailing vessel of the Golden Age, the kind of three-masted, cannon-bristling ship a serious pirate crew wanted, was one of the most expensive and complex machines a human being could build in the entire 18th century. It was that era's fighter jet, thousands of trees, miles of rope, acres of sail, months of skilled labor. In today's money, building a functional tall ship of that class runs into the millions of dollars. Call the ship, honestly, $3 million of hull, rigging, and craftsmanship floating on the water, and understand that a pirate acquired it the only way he could afford to, by taking it. Add it to the total, $3 million, and not 1 cent of it was paid for legally. And which ship you're stealing matters enormously, because pirates, like any business, had to choose a model. At the small end, there's the sloop, fast, nimble, shallow enough to hide in coastal waters and outrun a Navy warship, but lightly armed and unable to take on anything big. This is the lean startup, cheap to run, quick to escape, perfect for hit-and-run raids on soft targets. In the middle, the workhorse, a captured merchant vessel, upgunned, big enough to fight and carry real plunder, but slow enough to be caught. And at the top, the dream, a full frigate-class warship, the flagship, dozens of guns, a crew of hundreds, able to take on almost anything afloat, but a floating city that costs a fortune to feed, and is far too valuable and slow to ever hide. The bigger the ship, the bigger the prize you can take, and the bigger the target you become. Every pirate captain was constantly solving the same equation every business solves: growth versus overhead, firepower versus speed, ambition versus the very real chance it gets you killed. Now, you have to arm it, because an unarmed ship is not a pirate ship, it's a target. Cannons were the single most expensive thing you could bolt to a wooden hull. Each gun was a massive, hand-cast piece of iron or bronze, absurdly heavy, requiring a reinforced deck to carry it and a trained team to serve it. A well-armed ship carried dozens of them, plus the powder, the shot, the muskets, the pistols, the cutlasses, and the endless barrels of gunpowder that made the whole thing one lucky spark away from a very short career. Arming a serious pirate ship, in modern terms, is easily another $500,000 of weaponry, most of it, again, stolen or salvaged. Add it to the total, $3.5 million. And then you have to provision it, and this is where new pirates went broke before they ever saw a doubloon. Because a ship full of fighting men is, above all, a ship full of appetites. You are feeding dozens, sometimes hundreds of hungry, thirsty, hard-working men for weeks or months at a time, with no supermarket for 1,000 miles. Salt pork, hardtack, dried beans, and above all, an almost unbelievable quantity of alcohol. Because the water went foul in the barrels within days, and beer and rum did not. A single voyage's provisions, the food, the water, the medicine, the spare sails and rope and tar and nails to keep the ship alive, comes to another $500,000 in modern money before you've even left port. Add it to the total, $4 million. And here is the first hard truth of pirate economics. This is a capital-intensive, high-overhead business. It costs a fortune to run, which means a pirate crew was under enormous, constant financial pressure. They could not simply sail around being free. They had to earn, and earn constantly, just to keep the ship from becoming a very expensive, very slowly sinking prison. Now, before we go further, I have to explain the engine of the whole operation, because this is the part the movies get completely, spectacularly wrong, and it's the single most interesting thing about piracy as a business. We imagine a pirate captain as a tyrant, dictator with a sword, ruling a terrified crew by fear, and that is almost the exact opposite of how a successful pirate ship actually worked, because a pirate crew was, functionally, a worker-owned cooperative, a floating democracy, and it ran on a document that would horrify every legitimate ship's owner of the era, the Articles. Before a voyage, the crew wrote and signed a contract. The Articles laid out the rules, the discipline, and, crucially, exactly how the loot would be divided. And here's the shocking part. The crew elected their captain by vote, and they could unelect him by vote the moment he stopped delivering. On most pirate ships, the captain only held absolute authority in one situation, during battle. The rest of the time, the real day-to-day power belonged to another elected officer, the quartermaster, who represented the crew's interests against the captain, like a union rep with a pistol. And the pay. Oh, the pay. On a legitimate merchant ship, the structure was brutally unequal. The captain and the owners took almost everything, and the ordinary sailor got a tiny fixed wage, was beaten at will, and had no stake whatsoever in the voyage's success. On a pirate ship, the plunder was divided by shares, written into the Articles. A common pirate got one full share. The captain, the man in the coat, the legend, got maybe 2 shares. 2, not 200. The most powerful man on the ship earned roughly twice what the newest deckhand earned, and every man aboard knew the exact ratio, because he'd signed it. That is the engine. That is the real reason piracy exploded across the Golden Age and drew thousands of recruits from the legitimate navy and merchant fleets. It was not bloodlust, it was the compensation package. Piracy offered ordinary working men 3 things the entire legal world of the 18th century denied them: a vote, a fair and transparent share of the profits, and a boss they could fire. A sailor in the Royal Navy was, functionally, a prisoner earning almost nothing. That same man, under the black flag, became a shareholder in a heavily armed startup, with equity, a ballot, and a voice. The gold was the advertisement. The deal was the product. Okay, let's talk running costs. The money that bleeds out of the operation whether you take a prize or not. First and biggest, the ship itself is a money pit that is actively trying to die at all times. A wooden ship in warm tropical waters is under constant assault. Shipworms literally eat the hull from below. Weed and barnacles grow on the bottom and slow the ship, and a slow pirate ship is a dead pirate ship, because you catch nothing and everyone catches you. So every couple of months you had to careen. Run the ship up onto a remote beach, tip it completely over on its side, and have the whole crew scrape, burn, and re-tar the entire hull by hand. It was exhausting. It was dangerous. It left you defenseless for days, and it was completely non-negotiable. The maintenance on a wooden fighting ship is relentless and permanent, and every hour spent careening is an hour not spent earning. Then there's the crew, and the crew has to eat and drink through all of it, prize or no prize. Then the constant replacement of what breaks and burns. Sails shredded in storms, rope rotted by salt, spars snapped, powder spent. Roll it together, the food, the repairs, the endless consumables, and a working pirate ship burned through the modern equivalent of $1 million a year just to keep floating and fighting. Every year, whether or not they ever found a single chest of gold. Add year one's operating cost to the total. We're at $5 million, and the ship has to steal that back before it earns a penny of profit. So let's talk about the plunder. And this is where we have to kill the most beloved myth in the entire genre. Because when you picture pirate treasure, you picture a wooden chest overflowing with gold coins and jewels, buried on a beach under a big red X. And that, almost entirely, is a fantasy. Buried treasure was virtually non-existent. That's mostly one novel's invention. And gold and jewels were a tiny fraction of what pirates actually took. What did they actually plunder? Cargo. Boring, unglamorous, enormously valuable cargo. They took cloth and fabric, which was hugely valuable in an age before machine looms. They took food and spices and sugar. They took tools, weapons, and raw materials. They took medicine, which was worth its weight in silver. They took the ship's equipment itself, the sails, the rope, the spare anchors. And they took the single most valuable cargo of that horrific era, which we should be honest about. On the worst voyages, they took the enslaved human beings that the legitimate merchant ships were transporting and sold them, because the entire economy pirates fed on was built on that trade. The romance of piracy sits on top of a great deal of real horror, and the ledger doesn't let you look away from it. The point, economically, is this. A pirate wasn't hunting for a magic chest of gold. He was running a high-risk cargo interception business, capturing everyday goods and reselling them through a network of shady, thrilled, and extremely willing merchants and colonial ports who loved buying quality goods at pirate prices, no questions asked. Piracy wasn't treasure hunting. It was aggressive, violent, deeply illegal supply chain arbitrage, and the smartest pirates understood something every modern company spends fortunes learning. The cheapest fight is the one you never have, because a battle was, economically, a catastrophe even when you won. Cannon fire wrecked the very cargo you were trying to steal. It damaged your own irreplaceable ship. It killed crew you couldn't easily replace, and it burned through wildly expensive gunpowder. A pirate who had to actually fight for every prize would go broke and die fast. So the truly successful pirates invested in the one thing that made the fighting unnecessary: a reputation, delivered by a brand. That skull and crossbones flag, the Jolly Roger, was not decoration. It was marketing. It was a logo, deliberately designed to trigger one specific response in the crew of a target ship. Surrender now, unharmed, or face a horror you've heard stories about. The whole point of a fearsome pirate's carefully cultivated legend, the wild appearance, the lit fuses, the gruesome rumors, was to make prey give up without a shot. A pirate's reputation was a cost-saving device. Terror was cheaper than combat, and the brand did the raiding so the cannons didn't have to. These men understood psychological warfare and brand equity centuries before either had a name, because for them, it was simply the difference between a profitable afternoon and a fatal one. And now the hidden costs, because the black flag had a list, and every item on it is worse than the last. Hidden cost number 1. The ship is a slow-motion financial disaster even when nothing goes wrong. We covered careening, but understand what it means for the business model. A huge fraction of your time, effort, and money goes not into raiding, but into fighting the ocean's endless, patient effort to dissolve your single most valuable asset. Most of a pirate's life was not swashbuckling. It was maintenance, boredom, and manual labor, punctuated by short bursts of extreme violence. The job was 90% unpaid ship repair and 10% terror. Hidden cost number 2, disease. This is the real killer, the one no movie shows. Far more pirates died of illness than ever died in battle or at the end of a rope. Cram 100 men onto a filthy wooden ship in the tropics with rotting food, foul water, no medicine, and no understanding of infection, and the ship becomes a floating petri dish. Fevers, dysentery, infected wounds that turned fatal from a single splinter. Your crew, your entire workforce, and your entire fighting force was being silently, constantly depleted by things no cutlass could stop. Hidden cost number 3. And this is the strangest and most human line in the whole ledger. Pirates had workers' compensation. It's true, and it's astonishing. Written right into the articles, before the fighting ever started, was a fixed schedule of payouts for injuries. Lose your right arm in battle, and the articles specified a set sum, paid off the top of the plunder before anyone took their share. Lose a leg, a different sum. An eye, a hand, a finger, each had a price, agreed in advance, in writing, by a democratic vote of the crew. This is disability insurance, a formal, funded, worker-approved compensation scheme, running on illegal ships crewed by outlaws more than a century before any government offered ordinary workers anything remotely like it. The men's society had branded as its most lawless criminals, had quietly built one of the fairest workplaces of the entire age. So let's be realistic, like we always are, and talk about the spike, the one cost that dwarfs every other, the line item that was always, eventually, coming due. And it wasn't paid in money, it was paid in your neck, because here is the number that ends the fantasy. The average successful pirate career lasted, by most estimates, around 2 years. And it did not usually end with a beach, a hammock, and a chest of gold. It ended in one of two ways: dead, of disease or violence, or dancing at the end of a rope in a harbor, hanged in public and left in a cage as a warning to others. The great powers of the world decided piracy was an existential threat to trade, and they hunted it to extinction with a ruthlessness that makes the pirates look tame. The golden age of piracy was short, precisely because the empires it stole from eventually brought the full weight of the state down on a few thousand men in wooden boats. The house did not just win. The house hanged you in the town square. So let's run the lifetime numbers. Optimistic versus realistic, like we always do. The optimistic pirate is a real, if rare, figure. A tiny handful of captains hit the jackpot. One of the most successful, Bartholomew Roberts, captured hundreds of ships and took a genuine fortune. A single legendary raid could, in modern terms, net a crew tens of millions of dollars in one afternoon, split by shares, making every ordinary man aboard suddenly, briefly, richer than he could have dreamed. That is the dream that fueled the whole enterprise, and for a lucky few, it was real. The optimistic pirate walks away rich, but we deal in realistic, and the realistic pirate is the one the recruiting posters never mentioned. He signs the articles. He spends 2 years scraping barnacles, choking on foul water, and terrified in short bursts of violence. He takes a few modest cargoes of cloth and sugar that get split so many ways his share is decent, but not life-changing. He watches disease carry off his friends one by one, and then, at the end of it, the Navy catches up. And his career and his life end together, at the end of a rope, having netted, over the whole doomed adventure, a sum that in modern money might be a few tens of thousands of dollars. Realistically, the pirate did not get rich. He got a vote, a fair share of very little, and an early, public death. That's the real ledger. To run the operation, millions. To earn back from it, for the typical man, a pittance and a noose. The economics of piracy, for the average pirate, were catastrophic. And they did it anyway, in their thousands. Which brings us to the only question that actually matters. If the pay was bad and the ending was a rope, why? Why did so many men choose it, eyes open, knowing the odds? And the answer is the whole point of this video, and it's the reason pirate economics still fascinates us 300 years later. They didn't do it to get rich. Almost none of them got rich. They did it because of what they were escaping. The alternative, for a poor working man in the 18th century, was a life of near-total powerlessness. Brutal, underpaid labor on a merchant ship or in the Navy, under a captain who could flog you to death legally, with no vote, no stake, no rights, and no way out, for a wage that kept you permanently poor. That was the legitimate option. That was the respectable life on offer. And piracy, for all its horror and all its doom, offered the one thing that world would not. For a brief, violent, glorious moment, a man could be free. He could vote. He could own a real share of what he risked his life for. He could look the captain in the eye as an equal, and, if the man failed them, throw him out. For 2 years, before the rope, an ordinary nobody could live as a full and equal member of a society that treated him as a shareholder instead of a slave. And thousands of men looked at that trade, a few years of dangerous freedom against a lifetime of safe servitude, and decided the freedom was worth the noose. That's the real economics of the pirate ship. The treasure was almost never real. The gold was a story. The buried chest never existed. What was real was the deal. The shocking, radical, centuries-ahead deal. A vote, a share, and a voice, sold at the price of your life. The pirates weren't chasing gold. They were buying, for a couple of desperate years, the feeling of being free men, and they paid for it in full. So, the next time you see that black ship come out of the fog, and the captain grins, and the flag snaps in the wind, don't think about the treasure. There wasn't any. Think about the articles. Think about the vote. Think about a crew of the poorest, most disposable men of their age, who built, out of nothing, on stolen ships, one of the fairest deals a working man could get anywhere in the world, and defended it to the gallows. The gold was a myth. The freedom was the fortune. And it was, for a couple of unforgettable years, worth every penny it cost them, which was, in the end, everything. Thanks for watching. If you want to see another impossible enterprise priced out to the last coin, the video on running an entire chocolate factory with a workforce nobody pays is right over there. See you in the next one.